Good to see you, good people. My name is Elvar. I'm coming directly at you from Egilsstaðir, Iceland, and I am so very happy to be bringing you another episode of Peeling the Onion. This time I had the pleasure and the honor to sit down with Mr. Lou Barlow. Lou's been around since the mid-80s. He's been playing with bands like Dinosaur Jr., Sebadoh, the Folk Implosion, as well as doing solo material under his own name and the name Sentridoh. The Folk Implosion is going out on tour next Thursday across the East Coast and the east part of the Midwest, so you guys should check it out. Dinosaur Jr. also going out on a crazy stadium tour in September and October with the Flaming Lips and Weezer. But Lou, he was incredibly candid and generous with his time. We sat down for over 2 hours, and I mean, he is one of the most prolific musicians of his generation, and even if we look further. So I do hope you enjoy it, and all the best.
Okay.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, no worries.
So how are we on time? Like, do you have to be off like completely at a certain time?
Not really.
Okay, I'll try to keep it like within the 90 minutes.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so let's just get started. So I'm catching you between tour dates. Like you and John, you just did like a 13-date track across the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
You're going back out next Thursday and doing like 11 more dates, right, around the East Coast and the Midwest.
Exactly. Yep.
I can see at least 2 of those dates are all ages gigs. And you and John are both doing solo sets prior to the gig in Minneapolis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think both. I think all of them we do. We've started to do it on all the shows.
Really?
He plays 3 songs, I play 3 songs, and then we play together.
Okay, nice. Cool. Are you taking requests on the solo sets, or you're just doing like something?
I'm taking requests. Yeah.
Okay. When you
Yeah.
do those, you're drawing material from your whole career, right?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Yep.
So you guys are playing some old songs along with the lion's share of the new album, Walk Through Me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think we hit every record that we've done.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Almost every. I mean, not the. We don't play some of the really obscure 7-inch stuff, but we do.
Okay.
We do them all from all the albums that we, including the kids soundtrack. We touch on all of that.
Right. How was it getting back together with John after all that time?
Oops.
Did you hear me? I asked you how was it getting back together with John after all that time?
It was great. It's very easy. I mean, we've been in contact now since 2021. So we've been, spending more and more time with each other, and we worked very closely on the new record that we did. And
Right.
so yeah, getting back into a van with him and playing shows seems perfectly natural.
Right. Nice. Yeah, I've been seeing some YouTube videos. It seems like you guys are
Yeah.
having a good time and the crowd also. So
Yeah, it's been a very, very nice vibe, being just, yeah, people are very patient and generous with us, and we really have just really been coming together more and more musically, and it's great.
right. You guys dialed in the sounds. You're not doing just like playbacks and like playing guitar and
No,
bass over them. Like
no, there's a few instances. John really took a lot of care. He really wanted to take a lot of care in making the rhythm tracks kind of unique to each song and really working with them. He really fine-tuned them even after we started the shows. He would say like, okay, in this one, because for instance, we're playing some of the songs could be stems, like you say, like the backing tracks, but we choose which ones, and then you can fine-tune that, or you can create a whole new. He's been creating whole new rhythm tracks with his MPC,
nice.
and kind of going back and forth between the two, and like seeing what works and what might be better if it was tweaked a little bit. And that's been his kind of passion for this tour. He had a vision for it, and he's been following through with it, which was a lot. It was a lot of work to undertake, because I've done tours where I've tried to create tasteful backing tracks and figure out how to do that. I find it very challenging, and for this tour, I pretty much the only thing that I could really concentrate on was playing bass and singing at the same time, which is the way I play bass in Folk Implosion is very different than the way I play bass with Dinosaur Jr.
Sure.
And it's more difficult. Like your brain has to, there's a little bit more of a, there's some moves, little mental gymnastics that my brain needs to do to play the bass and sing
Right.
well at the top,
Right.
over the top of it. So that's been mostly the only thing that I can really focus on. But
Okay.
John is taking on guitar and then rhythm tracks, and also keyboards. So
Nice.
yeah,
Like you guys yourself released an EP like 2 years ago, the Feel It If You Feel It.
yeah, yeah,
That was an engineered and mixed by this guy Scott Salter, as was the new album, right?
yeah, yep, yep.
How did you get together with Scott?
John started working with him years ago
Okay.
and felt very comfortable with him.
Okay.
And John moved to Durham, North Carolina. And one of the reasons that he moved there, besides it being a pretty decent place to live, is that Scott lived there. And Scott has a lot of experience recording a lot of bands. You can sort of access his
Right. No,
his
yeah.
resume.
And
You
he's
know,
also an accomplished musician. He's
he's an
released a bunch of
accomplished
stuff.
musician, and
Yeah.
he's a bit he's experimental. He's open-minded. He has he's got what he has what also what we really like is a strong personality. You know, having someone to work with someone who has opinions, is pretty important for us. And Scott fits is all of that. So
Okay. Did he dictate somewhat of how arranged or produced the
not so
stuff?
much,
Or
I wouldn't say arrangement, but I mean, um, yeah, I mean, no, I think that when you add someone like an engineer like that into the process early on, I mean, that person is going to hopefully, I think it should absolutely be part of the creative process.
Mhm.
And Scott is, you know, he was part of the creative process, but I think ultimately, yeah, we make the decisions you know, but I
Okay.
think he was really good I mean, he really helped us perfect our vocals, let's say, really pushed us to like perform our best vocals and was could be critical about things that we added and we just made sure that the performances were up, were quality and as full as we could make it, because
Right. Okay. Did you do some like preliminary recordings before you went,
oh yeah,
down to
many.
North Carolina? Okay.
Yeah, we did
Did you?
many. I mean, next, we did many. John and I, we had, instrumental works for all, completed instrumental demos for all of the songs
Ah,
between the two of us. And then John and Scott actually came to where I'm at in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and we used a studio here to record all of the rhythm and bass tracks
okay.
that we built the songs off of. They came here to do that.
Okay.
Was a bit of a back and forth, and then the record was really fleshed out as far as things being added to it was in Durham, North Carolina, and I went there several times, in the middle of Dinosaur Jr. tours, or I would make, dedicated visits and spend a few days with John, in the studio with Scott. So, we did, yeah, it was we're very methodical when we work. We've always been that way. That's the thing that I consider the most interesting and successful thing about the band is that John and I are real methodical. We really love to discuss every little aspect of what we do.
Mm,
And this was just a new opportunity to do that, you know.
right. I read an interview, fairly recent interview, where John said that you rarely have had things written before you start recording. Is that an accurate statement, or
Did he say what now?
that you rarely have things written before you start recording?
Um, well, I mean the original, yeah, our original sessions together are improvisational.
Okay, so that's more the original stuff he's talking
The
about back in
original
the
stuff
90s.
between, yeah, no, and even now, I mean, the new record is all based off of bass and drum improvisations from two
Uh-huh.
days.
Okay.
We had 2 days of just playing bass and drums together, John on drums, myself on bass, and we created the basic ideas for the entire record were generated in 2 days, and
All right.
those were improvisational. I think what he's referring to is that we don't bring ideas that we've came up with beforehand. Like, hey, I'm working on this riff. Although we've done that too to great effect. I mean,
Uh,
it's just, but this record in particular, we actually it is really from everything is from improvisations, and the vast majority of the material that we've generated is all based on initial, improvisational sessions that we do. And then
nice.
we fine tune it. Then we like, well, this one is good. And what do you think about this one? And then John will add guitar or, and if I start to hear, vocal melodies or additional music, then I add that. And then it sort of opens the basic ideas that we come up with, the basic improv, skeletons of the song become things that we then just flesh out, that become, these living things, that
Right.
songs that speak. So
Like the sound of it, it's somewhat of a continuation of what you were doing on One Part Lullaby, maybe less trip hop influenced.
yeah, yeah, we didn't less than that. I think John really wanted to play live drums on the
Uh-huh.
record for the most part. Which was, I don't know, it made sense to us. I mean, that's how we generated the original ideas. Um, but yeah, it sets it from it actually, I mean, I guess it would stylistically put it more in between One Part Lullaby and the record before that, which was called Dare to Be Surprised,
Oh yeah.
which was
More live
which was
drums or mixed up live drums and
yeah,
trip
it
hops.
was a
Yeah.
lot of live drums, and even the kids soundtrack had some live drums in it as well. So
Yeah.
I think that I mean, going forward, I think just because of John's experience, the experience we're having right now, where John is generating the beats, or where we're both, we're collaborating on what the rhythm tracks are going to be, I think that might be something that we pursue. That might be our
Mm.
next step, is actually pursue more electronic beats.
Okay.
And so, because
So you
that's just, but when we got together, it had to be very immediate, and it had to be like, you know, and it
right.
was good too because it was sort of physical of the way that we reconnected. It was like we connected in a very hot place. We were almost like in a sauna. Like we were in the attic of my house. It was very, very hot in the middle of July, and we were just sweating together, just like purging and sweating and playing and really collaborating for the first time. And, at that point, it would have been 22 years. So
Yeah.
23 years.
So you didn't use any sequencers on the new album?
Not really. No,
Ah, really?
actually nothing.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
it's all based on live drums. Yeah.
Did you sample or loop any of the live drum takes or really?
Not
Okay.
not
That's
really. I mean, I'm sure they were we definitely bolstered and doctored them. I also had a percussionist come in, Ryan Jewell, who added percussion and some drums as well.
mm,
So
okay.
it's not like it's, but as far as sequencers and beats go, we didn't actually, no. I would say that would be kind of what makes this record unique, is that we didn't just go, I mean, the logical thing, I suppose, might have been, yes, just pick up where we left off with One Part Lullaby and use sequencers and drum machines. But I think it just suited us better and was and felt more intimate, I guess, at the time for us
Mm,
to do more, base things off of more live things.
right. There's also quite nice like Middle Eastern flavor on a few of the songs. Was it John who
Yeah.
brought in these like string instruments?
Yeah, we've always kind of experimented with string instruments and used different ones. Like
Right.
One Part Lullaby had a lot of harp and psaltery.
Right.
And when I play guitar, I have my guitar approaches. I generally play four-string acoustic guitars and in tunings that I've developed over the years that I use with Sebadoh and things in my solo stuff.
Yeah.
So when I approached adding stringed instruments to the record as well, I used just unconventional stuff. But John he did really, in a very, almost like a scholarly way, actually pursue Middle Eastern instruments and took lessons for the
Right.
guitar as one. And but he has a few really, he has some exotic, I mean, exotic to us. I mean, certainly not exotic to people who listen. I mean,
Sure.
I don't want that to be like a pejorative term, but
No, right.
I think we've always really been interested in using more like just folk, like, folk music, really, like
Yeah.
whether it be like just acoustic folk, or whether it be like, folk music from around the world. We've always been really, really interested in that, and John really followed through with that.
Right. I mean, they're super well integrated with the traditional instruments. Like it makes for a really nice palette
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Now the way
Like,
that those instruments sound with like a deep bass, I mean, it's something, it's there's so much more that can be done in that realm for sure.
I mean, there's also some synthesizers on the album, right?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Were they more like hardware or software synths or both?
Both.
Uh-huh.
John
Okay.
has a few. He's I think one of the really pleasantly surprising things about reconnecting with John after so long was to realize that even though he became very separated from music, and for quite a while, for maybe 10 years, I don't think he played, or and he had kind of like sort of bowed out from being a musician. But when it came back, when his desire to make music came back, it came back fiercely, and
Okay.
he acquired like a lot of synthesizers, a lot of software, and it was really impressive to go to his house after all and go like, oh wow, like he's really like he's ready, he's ready to really step back into this collaboration and bring
Nice.
and kind of put and really and he I think the great thing too is that he I think we do have a real DIY spirit between us, and I think as we move forward, we'll probably embrace that even more. I think we really, for making our first record and having coming together for the first time, and considering that we didn't live in the same area, we needed someone like Scott to really glue it together for us. But going forward, I'm really curious to see how we do it, because I think we can do quite a bit of work between us before we add more people to the mix. So
Right.
I'm
Because
kind of
you
interested.
did the live session, like, was it last year? You did like
Hmm.
five of the tracks from the original musical
Yeah,
kid score. Is that
yeah.
in the cards to go out and tour the Folk Implosion with like a full band or?
That's totally dependent on money. That's
Right.
it's not something I like to like talk about too much, because I don't want to make it a big deal.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because I
Cool.
think, but we have to be very realistic about how we play, and
Okay.
we have to be very pragmatic. So I think
Mm-hmm.
ideally, in a perfect world, I would love to assemble a band.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that would be amazing. But that's expensive.
Right.
And because it's like at this point, John and I both we're adults with lives, and
Yeah.
John needs to he works full time. Yeah, musician, we don't, people, I would never expect anyone to pay to play for us.
Really?
I
I
think,
thought you could gather up some fanboys for sure.
no, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I would love to make steps like that, and hopefully we can, in the
Cool.
future.
Okay. Were you guys present for the mixing of the new album, or how was that?
Yeah,
You and John?
John was mostly in Durham. It was a little frustrating for me, to be honest. Like I was here and receiving mixes.
Okay.
That process is not unknown to me, but it's I do really I would have preferred to be, but then again, I knew when we started this record, I understood that we were not going to be able to do that, that there were so many constraints, like financial constraints, time constraints. So I think the final mixing was a bit of a blind thing for me. I was receiving mixes and then making detailed notes and then sending them and hope. I mean, it can be a very, very enervating process,
Yeah.
because I mean, when John and I have worked together before and we've made records, when we really lock down, like I mean, when we did One Part Lullaby, we actually mixed the record at one point, and I was just vehemently like, this has got to be remixed. I was like, and our producer at the time, Wally, Wally Gagel and John were like, "Oh no, it sounds done." And I was like, "It's not done." I was like, I had to, I just became extremely like, we have to start from the ground up. And then
Okay.
luckily at that point, the people that we were working with at the record label were like, "I don't know, these mixes aren't that great." Like I had someone agree with me and I'm like, "Oh." So we were
Okay.
able, because my idea was to give us even more. Anyway, it's a long story. It's part of the one part lullaby lore, but I would say I really wanted that record to be mixed by Wally in Wally's house. I didn't want to do it in a bit. I thought when we did it in a big studio that it clouded things, and it was like I thought that Wally was a much more effective mixer when he was doing it in his own space with his own material, and then
Mm.
also and that way too, making it more accessible to John and I. So, and that's
Okay.
what ended up happening with the mixes for that record. So I would have potential. I mean, I think I can be. I'm very opinionated when I'm working on things, and even though John and this is a very much a collaborative project, I take that. I mean, that collaboration means we both really we go for what we want. We don't. There's not a lot of like. I mean, there's compromise, but those compromises are won. We win those compromises. There's a and the mixing process is so important. So
Okay. I mean, I've done that myself, sending mix back and forth and then giving the guy notes. And it was one track and I was driving him insane, so I
yeah,
know that.
I know. It's like you just it's so it's I yeah I think yeah I have to admit that I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy about that.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you released Moonlit Kind. That was the first
Hmm.
single of the album, right?
Hmm.
And then you did like Bobblehead Doll and My Little Lamp as a double single with these accompanying videos.
Yes. Yep.
Uh, Bobblehead Doll, that was directed by John,
Hmm.
and My Little Lamp was done by you and your wife Adele from the ground up, right?
Yeah. Yep. 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 We did
All
that.
right. I mean, it's good work. Got like nice stop motion scenes and a handheld puppet who's smoking a cigar, and later on, what seems to be a crack pipe, although I might be wrong.
Yep. No, it's a correct, babe. No, we actually went to we live in kind of a gritty town.
Okay.
It's a small, kind of gritty American town, and there's a smoke shop downtown, and we walked in and we said, "What's this? What's the sketchiest shit you sell in here?" I'm like, "Who? What do people?" I mean,
Oh,
and
really?
we made friends with the kid behind the counter. And he was just like, and we just got into a really funny conversation. And eventually, and as he realized what we were after, he started like, "Well, there's this." And I'm like, "Well, would someone smoke crack out of that?" And he's like, "They could."
Okay. That's
And
funny.
and then we went and near the same shop, we went and gathered small little, they call them nips, or little bottles of alcohol that just collect in the streets around downtown. And so yeah, Adele and I made sort of a sweep of just all the things that, people would use when they're partying, and
Right.
and sort of to illustrate how, as a parent, your mind can go to such dark places.
Right.
So we
I,
wanted to sort of be something to be sort of cutesy and warm and, playing off the lamb idea, but also to like introduce darkness, the way that you can feel,
yeah,
as a
good
parent.
juxtaposition for sure.
Yeah.
Like in that song, you're writing about how it's like being a father, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first time you devoted like a whole song to tackling that subject head on,
I
right? Am I right
I
about
think
that?
so. I think so.
I
Yeah, I
mean,
think it's
you
the
had mentioned it in like state of
yeah.
mind from defend yourself like a little bit, but maybe never
Oh
in
yeah,
like
that's
a
true. I did do that one. That was
but
like
never
an
like
but I
never
think
like a whole song or what?
never like a whole song, and one that we
All right,
really,
that's
because I
cool.
think so many of the other ones, I mean, yes, I refer to it, but mostly it's about my own. I was still talking about building my own spirit. I think this is more, it was still more of a self-involved. Those were more still self-involved. This one, I think, is more just, it's about the opposite of self-involvement, where you are so involved with your children, and learning where your boundaries, what their boundary, like where the boundaries are, how much power you actually do have, how effective, and how to effectively parent kids without, without turning them away from you or scaring them away, but also being able to like sort of, I don't know, it's just hard. It's how to support them, I guess, really how to support them, which is, I think that's the most challenging thing I find, is like, how do you effectively support your kids? How do you make, because sometimes you can just talk and talk and talk and tell them all kinds of things and all kinds of ideas and bombard them with what they should do. But that's never that I'm not sure how effective that is. And that's what that song is about,
Yeah. I mean, they keep putting on those videos saying like, don't tell them they're smart, tell them they're hard workers and da 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 da. You have to do this and do that.
There's so much information.
Yeah. Well, that was the first song that I and probably a lot of people heard, because you played it like I think on the first episode of Raw Impression, like back in 2022, late 22. So
I did, yeah.
And it was kind of sad. Like the lyrics were completely sad by then. Like a few lines were maybe switched, but it was kind of done.
Yeah, true. Mm-hmm.
Did you and John, sequence the album together? How did that go?
I think I came up with the first sequence.
Okay.
And I have this, it's happened with the last Sebadoh record. It's happened, like, I'll get a sequence like out of the blue and be like, that's it. And then I am almost like so assured of that sequence that like for this sequence, I came up with this sequence, and then very quickly too. I mean, it's funny how it happens too, because sequencing can be a lot of hand wringing and a lot of like discussion and deliberation and but for me, I think it's like it always ends up being impulsive. And it's like, but it's kind of based, but it's impulsive, but it's also based on, like, for instance, for this record, I mean, these songs were, and like you said, I mean, I was playing an early version of My Little Lamb 2 years before, not quite 2 years, but a year before the record was finished. So I have like an emotional I have like a landscape of what the lyrics are saying, which song is the strongest. I've kind of got all of that swirling around, and the sequence came to me very quickly, and I was like, John, this is the sequence. And I'm just then crossing my fingers like I hope he doesn't disagree, because if he disagrees, then I'm going to become very passionate about why I think it should be this. And that's when you enter territory, especially if you're doing it remotely, it's like where you have to be very, very careful about how you express yourself when it comes to texts and emails. Like in person can be a lot easier because there's nuances that can be.
Sure.
But I find that when I'm really opinionated about things, that I don't communicate the best with words through texts and things. So I was like, oh gosh, I hope he likes the sequence. And he just came back like, that's perfect. And I'm like,
oh, really? Okay.
I'm like, thank God. Like, I was like, and I still very much stand by the sequencing. I'm like, I think my main objective was to keep the song Crepuscular and the song Moonlit Kind as far away from each other as possible, because they're almost the same song.
They're very similar.
They're very similar structurally, and then structurally they're very similar. Thematically they're very similar, and they actually mentioned there's also some of the same imagery within the two songs. So I thought that right away that those two needed to bookend the record. In order to not just for me to be able to tolerate it, because I'm like, if these songs are close to each other,
right,
I'm going to be very disappointed. So that was my first rule, was to keep the two songs that are both crepuscular, and they're about evenings and mornings, and just waking into a day and to disappearing from a day, and they're both about that. And one is more of a love song, which is Moonlit Kind, which closes the record. Crepuscular it seems like more of the introduction, which is good too, because that original riff of Crepuscular, John and I generated that in 1997, I think.
Oh, really?
and we had generated in it, and it was an idea. I've never been able to find a demo of the song, but we did it, and it's stuck in my mind. And when I played it I'm like, John, do you remember this? And I was playing it here in the house when John came. I played it, and he immediately played the guitar riff, and we played it almost all the way through from memory with no demo, like after 23 years.
No
We
way.
both played it. It was like wild. I'm like, it was a really wonderful thing. It was a wonderful little thing. Like, okay, we're kind of meant to be together, me and this guy. Like, this is,
Right. You still
we're
had
kind
the
of,
spark.
this is a real connection. I mean, not that I ever doubted it. I love what John and I have done together, but, and, and when you have such a long time, 20 plus years between even speaking with each other, and never mind collaborating, but just even speaking or having any idea, to then play to play a piece of music that we had composed together many years earlier, and to do it from the top of our heads without missing a note was like really, really interesting, and it was unique. I've never experienced anything like that. So
Nice.
that was cool.
I think, isn't Moonlit Kind like the first time the lead single of a Lou Barlow release is the album Closer?
I don't know, maybe.
I think so.
I never thought of that.
Not that it matters.
Yeah.
You guys, you also put out the Music for Kids archival release last
Yeah.
September.
Mm-hmm.
That whole trip kind of started in the mid-90s when this kid, Harmony Korine, sent you a script for a movie that he had written.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
read the whole thing at the time, or?
Yeah, so it was very easy. It was just all, I mean, script was like so basic that he sent me two scripts, one for kids and one for Ken Park, which I believe was produced later, but
Right.
they were both just very monosyllabic responses, and he was clearly trying to capture the way that like kids really communicated. There was no flourishes in the script. Like I think a lot of times I would assume that movie makers, like, I find that characters in movies often talk, they talk in longs and they're articulate. This was like an incredibly basic, inarticulate slab, very raw slab, this script. So I was like, wow, this is pretty raw. This is pretty basic. And then he just getting to know him after that, and him following up and really insisting that I work on the movie was really, it was cool,
So what sold you on doing it?
Just his dedication,
Okay.
And then I really liked that he seemed to understand where I was coming from artistically, and I understood what his concept was. His concept was that I was this indie rocker, college rocker, which I'm not. I'm not really. I mean, I'm a lifelong musician. I've never been a student, but except when I was young. But I think he had this idea that I was Boston, and there was like this sort of intellectual thing, and white, white intellectual, and then juxtaposing that with like really like New York street, multicultural street culture in New York.
Okay.
And he wanted to juxtapose the two, which I thought was really cool, because I think a lot of times, people like, this is that, so you do this music, or this is, I mean, he seemed to understand how powerful it can be when you mix two things that seem very different together. And I thought that was really cool, and that he wanted to do that. He wanted to juxtapose like just lo-fi indie rock with like urban, like just street stuff. And I thought that was cool. And, John and I ended up really collaborating, really wanting to, we ended up really using that studio time to experiment with a lot of aspects of like sampling and R&B and things that we were very interested in. And we took it upon ourselves to really make a more urban sounding soundtrack, but I think that was not really Harmony's.
Right.
There's still many examples of like lo-fi, the 4-track recordings, cassette recordings that are in the movie, which sound it's awesome what happens like when you put like a cassette recording on a big screen. It's just truly, I don't know what, like after we did it, and even when I see it now, when I see that juxtaposition, I'm like, why the fuck this is not all the time. Like this is just,
Mm.
it's so cool. I mean, this because there was pivotal music in that movie that was I did like with portable handheld tape recorders, but he had chosen before that they were just excerpts from my cassettes, and
Mm.
he really had very specific ideas for excerpts from my cassettes on certain scenes, and they worked beautifully.
Mm.
And then having the idea of "Spoiled" by Sebadoh being the rollout credit song was also totally inspired, but that was Harmony did that.
Mm. Do you think, like, because this is the first time you guys were recording together at like a proper studio, you and John, do
Mm.
you think it enabled you to realize like a vision that you
Yeah.
wouldn't have to be able to realize otherwise?
Yeah, we would have known. I mean, yeah, to be given like for someone like what happened was that London Records and the movie, I mean, they were like, go to the studio, we'll pay for everything, just
Yeah.
generate things. I mean,
Yeah.
because I mean, to be perfectly honest, like before that, um, I could never just walk into and especially that studio that we were working at, I could never walk into a studio like that and just do whatever I wanted for
Yeah.
2 weeks. I couldn't, it wouldn't be possible
Mm.
because it's just it was expensive then, it's expensive now, like and there's only so far I can get with I working from home with a limited amount of equipment. And I mean we were set free in that studio. There was everything. There was a clavioline, there was like incredible basses and incredible amplifiers that we would have never had access to. So
And you were fully funded, like no advance. Were just
fully
getting money and
funded,
did
no
everything.
advance,
Cool.
it was just like do what you can do. And we
And
were given some loose directives. Like at the end, they were like, "Can you make a song? We need a song for the movie." And that wasn't for the actual scenes in the movie. They just wanted a song that they could use to promote the movie with. And I just immediately had a vision of what that could be. And it was Natural One came from an instrumental that we had been kind of rejected already, which was fine, And I was like, well, let's strip down that instrumental, and I've got some fucking lyric ideas and melodic ideas, and let's do it. And we stripped that down and put it together almost immediately.
yeah,
Natural One. So
it's funny to hear when you released like the Chocolate Monk of edition of Walk Through This World.
yeah,
It has like this early. I had never heard that. It was
yeah,
really cool to hear that one.
yeah. That was our maiden voyage. Total
Right,
chaos. It was so much
right.
fun. That was like that was how we started, was just improv, mostly improv, and then the songs just started to piece together at that time too. And that was done right when I was started to write songs for Sebadoh's Bake Sale record too. So it was a really fertile time for me. I was just so in love with making music. And John and I had we had just really met we had started to spend time together in person after being kind of like pen pals, like writing back and forth to each other and being kind of like friends in theory, friends are sort of but when we actually met and became real friends and spent real time together, the music just started to come really quickly, which was wonderful.
Right. Had you guys started flirting with trip hop influences? Because before the Kids soundtrack, you were doing music on a very lo-fi end of the spectrum. Did that just happen in the studio, or how did that come about?
I think we both had very specific idea. I mean, we were listening to so much music that was like that already. I mean, there was
Okay,
like, I was really obsessed with this band Moonshake from the UK,
right.
who were using a lot of samples. They were kind of they sort of came out of what you would call shoegaze, but really really interesting, texturally interesting band. And in that time too, I mean, like the R&B stuff was like really fucking, I mean, it was
Right.
just, I mean, I always just thought I loved like 90s R&B. Like it became experimental. It became like, I mean, not that it ever, I just think R&B in general has always like, they always, I just think the palette that they've drawn, I mean, I don't know. When I say they, I mean, I'm saying like black artists they make, they kind of make the most interesting pop music in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I've felt that way for a very long time. And growing up on 70s funk and, you know, on the radio. And so, and, you know, NWA completely changed. Dr. Dre, like, really changed the landscape. Wu-Tang Clan, rap in general. I mean, God, De La Soul, all that stuff was so vibrant. And I think that both John and I, even having the idea, getting a sampler or having it at that point was like, seemed so, but when we walked in and asked Wally Gagel, like, can you sample? And he's like, yes. And then we immediately pulled out like a stack of CDs and said, we want to sample this and we want to sample that. I mean, this is a few years after like Cypress Hill, like where that music, the first Cypress Hill record is this amazing stew of just, I mean, really obscure bits of music. Some, you know, like it could be Jimi Hendrix, it could be sort of 60s garage rock. And, you know, John and I we really wanted to pull from like post-punk and 60, like really like 60s psychedelic stuff. And we had a stack of records ready to go. We wanted to sample Eric Satie, like these really minimal, beautiful piano pieces. Like this shit needs to be sampled now. It's like, because you just know, like when you listen, the way that, because we were both so, you know, we both were listening to so much music that when you feel enabled by something like Cypress Hill or by the early trip hop stuff too, like you're like, God, I wanted to, you kind of start to make your own roadmap. Like, first thing you do, sample the Silver Apples. Get a fucking Silver Apples record and sample that. It sounds amazing. And then, like, of course it does. Sample Gang of Four. That sounds incredible. Like, sample This Heat, which was this like post-punk band. And I mean, like, it's just, you just immediately can see all this stuff opening up, you know, back then. And we wanted to be a part of it. So when Wally could sample, we were like, okay, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it in a way that's not appropriating it. Like, and I'm not going to start rapping in the songs, and we're not going to, I'm like, we're going to do this like a conversation, which I think is really what, this is a point where either, if you talk to either John or I about this, we can just start talking and never shut up about it. But I think the most interesting music, like even post-punk was really influenced by funk, you know? And then rap, and the beginning of rap was really influenced by German bands, you know, like Kraftwerk and Giorgio Moroder. And like this is all like, it's just been a constant conversation between, you know, cultures and wouldn't seem like, you know, The Message by Grandmaster Flash was sampled from a nerdy art band in New York called Liquid, you know, created like these just goofy guys, you know, white dudes with glasses making this. I mean, that they sampled that and created the big, you know, those were the foundations of some of the earliest rap records. So I think that was something, I think I've always been fascinated by that. John has as well. He's one of the only people that I can talk to about something like that without feeling completely pretentious. You know, I feel like John and I can have those kind of conversations without anyone being threatened by it. And I can say things that I'm not going to be, you know, that someone's like, what are you talking about? You're thinking too much. You know, John and I, we have no fear of thinking too much. I'll just say that. So
nice. And you guys were able to do it with the backing, you know, like, you know, because I don't know. Wasn't it because like I think Paul's Boutique was one of the last albums where they could just sample what the fuck they wanted before it got like super expensive.
I know.
And it's kind of sad because like you can't really make these kaleidoscope, you know.
I know. I can't even, I mean, I went back, my son's really into, he's really into rap. He's really into new rap, which is cool. Like he plays stuff for me, but we often get into conversations and about it. And then because of streaming services now, I'm like, well, let's go back and listen to the Far Side. I've never heard the Far Side. Let's check this out, you know. And we're like, oh my fucking God. like, and there was, you realize that there was a point where it just became, you could not sample things. But before that, when the floodgates were open, I mean, oh my God, what an incredible like environment of, I have to get the charger from my computer.
Sure.
I'll be right back.
Cool.
Still look.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm back. Sorry.
Cool. I was thinking because when John left in '99 after One Part Lullaby, and you assembled the new Folk Implosion in the wake of that, and then when that iteration of the band folded, you released Emo, and that album, to my ears at least, it feels kind of a direct continuation of what you had been doing with the Folk Implosions, especially the new ones. I don't know, did you at the time,
Oh, really?
did you write the songs that ended up on Emo? Yeah, like if you compare it to like the split you did with Rooted True Way, your songs from Lupicor from the same era, I feel like it's more in like a continuation of that. Did you write the songs on Emo with the new Folk Implosion in mind, or how was that?
No, I was just writing songs. I think, well, actually, I think the song Caterpillar Girl from Emo would have been, it did come from the sessions that became the new Folk Implosion. It did.
Okay.
There was some crossover there. I mean, when John left the band, I tried to continue without him with our producer, Wally Gagel.
Right.
Like I did, and we did we did go in and we sampled the live drums, and I was working off of that, and it was in the wake of it, but it wasn't. I just felt, but I mean, Caterpillar Girl was a song of that, but I couldn't finish the lyrics. I came into this really intense writer's block after John left. I really didn't know. I didn't know really. I could generate. I mean, I can generate musical ideas all day long, but but there was such a our producer Wally, who had done One Part Lullaby and worked with us on the kids. I mean, he really was like, he's very, energetic. I mean, for him that it was like, okay, let's go, let's move on. We've got money to make this new Folk Implosion record. Let's move, and so he was really trying to push me along, and I just felt myself just becoming more and more depressed. And I felt really, I mean, it was a heartbreak really to lose John, because we didn't break up for creative reasons, we didn't even really break up for we broke up for reasons that were personal to like our own personal journeys, it's kind of, went our separate ways, but it had nothing to do really with any kind of real, crack between us, and creatively, it didn't really have anything to do with one wanting to pull in this direction and the other wanting to pull in another. It was very, our collaboration, our artistic collaboration was still vital. And so, and I just found myself really, like, I didn't want to, when I'm talking, we were talking about, just talking about the way that we were mixing influences and the way that, I mean, I couldn't have those conversations, and it became more, and I felt like I didn't want to do it without him. I didn't want to but I think at some point, I mean, Emo was finished and released in 2005. So that was full 5 years after John left the band.
Right.
And it took me that long I mean, I did New Folk Implosion, I guess, was 2003 or
2003, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And that record too. I mean, I got halfway through that record, and I was enjoying what I was doing with my new bandmates, which were really, it was Russ from Sebadoh and then my friend Ahmad. I was enjoying what we were doing, but I was like, I wanted it to be a dark rock band. I mean, I wanted to do something, to be kind of honest. I was more like, I was drawn to like darker rock. I wanted it to be like goth. I wanted it to be like a goth rock band. Because that's how I was feeling. I was like, I wanted to like go into the themes that I was feeling. I wanted to go into the darkness. I wanted to go into the regret that I had. I wanted to go into the sorrow that I felt losing John. I wanted to touch on how I felt, which was completely groundless. I mean, both One Part Lullaby and the Sebadoh, which were released in '99, were both flops, and both, I mean, Sebadoh was immediately dropped by Sire Records. We had no money to draw from after that. And then, Folk Implosion, like when I started to make the new Folk Implosion, they gave me two chances, and took what I was working on, and then finally pulled the plug.
Mm.
Like while but the good thing, it wasn't bad because they allowed me to continue working on material that they had paid for. They gave it to me.
Okay.
They're like, you're
Oh,
working on these
really?
songs. If this is a work in progress, like you can have it. They weren't like, we own this.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, it was totally cool. And they let me, so I had, and then but it did take me about 5 years. I mean, I did New Folk Implosion, which is it's a real particular record with a real particular taste, but it's from that time. It's a very honest, like expression of that time.
Mm.
And then emo also was songs that I kind of created, yeah, in the wake of losing John and just coming to terms with a lot of really yeah, I was just trying to describe a very difficult time. And emo, I think when emo really started to come together, when my writer's block began to clear, and when relationships that I had started to dissolve, and I was able to articulate that, and I was able to be honest about what had transpired. Like there's the song Legendary, which is about John. It's about my breakup with John, and that song really emotional for me. And then song like, I don't know, emo was like was me finally feeling like I was clawing my way out of a hole
Mm.
and feeling good, and feeling like. But in retrospect, it's funny when I look back on the record, I'm like, oh wow, that's a really sad record. Because I didn't feel like it was sad at the time. I felt like I was like, oh, this is me overcoming and finally producing something, and finally and surviving a writer's block, surviving like a feeling like nobody cared, and feeling
Mm-hmm.
like it didn't matter whether I made any new songs or not.
Right.
So emo was like that was that was a really important record for me to finally make. And then just not to call it something like Sentridoh or anything, just call it Lou Barlow, and just take ownership for everything that's happened and everything that might happen going forward.
Mm. I mean, you had Imad on there and Russell on a few tracks and Jason
Yeah.
and Adam
Yeah,
Harding, but you still kind of played the lion's share of the instruments yourself on that one, right?
I did. I had one really cool thing about the new Folk Implosion. What happened during the course of making that record was my friend Ahmad, um, he plays with the Yeah Yeah Yeahs now, and he has a pretty vibrant solo career. But at some point during making that record, he was like, Lou, you have to be the leader of the band, which was not typical for me because all of my Folk Implosion was very much a collaboration. Sebadoh was very much like being very conscious and giving everyone an equal voice and really not, me very consciously not taking a leader role in order to to make it to make my bandmates feel safe and comfortable and ready to get, that we were like to function as a collective. Like I've always wanted to be a collective. That's something that I've
Right. You love
always
collaboration.
wanted to, and I really held on to that dream of a collective for quite a while.
Mm.
But my friend Ahmad, he was just like, look, you got to be the leader. And I was like, okay, I do. And then 2005 was like finally it's just letting go of that idea of a collective and just taking it,
Mm.
just taking full responsibility for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also interesting because you were working on that album with some truly experienced producers, but you still like recorded and mixed half of the album yourself. Is
Yeah.
that accurate? And
Yeah.
it's actually funny because I cannot discern which songs were engineered and mixed at these like by these professional engineers at these
Yeah.
professional studios and which one were done by you.
Yeah.
But
No, I really yeah, that was too, I think what was really awesome that happened in that time period happened, approximately around 2009 or excuse me, 2000 or so. that's when the first like really affordable Pro Tools was made available. You could buy a kit for $1,000 and you could put Pro Tools on your computer, which I did. And that was a big step. Like, I think that actually changed everything. I mean, that changed the 2000s. Really, it began a really amazing period for music in general, I think, because so many bands could become their own producers. I mean, like Death Cab for Cutie, or I mean, like there was bands that really, Grizzly Bear, Animal Collect, I don't know, so many bands really, they were able to take it on their own and make their own very strange, idiosyncratic recordings without having to filter it through the studio system.
Right.
And Pro Tools was like a big part of that, because Pro Tools became the industry standard anyway in the 90s. And then, but by the 2000s, just regular people had it in their own hands. And if they had any sort of talent for engineering and the ability to buy a couple of good microphones, you could make a record that sounded as good as anything else,
Right.
So and I really, I benefited from that. I spent a lot of time over the shoulder of people working Pro Tools. So
right.
I learned a lot that way. So I was able to really become my own producer.
Wasn't that on Lullaby? Wasn't it Wally who got like Pro Tools originally?
Yeah, Wally got a very early version of Pro Tools.
Right.
For one part Lullaby. And because he was, I mean, like when we met him, like he had a sampler, so he always was, on the cut. He wanted to know, he was really always aware of the newest recording technology. So when Pro Tools was available to him, when it was like, $20 or $30,000, he was like, this is important that I learn this, and he knew that instinctively. And he was able to make that step, and then as the 2000s rolled around, then it became available. I mean, I went to Guitar Center in LA and bought myself a Pro Tools box, and I knew how to work. I kind of knew how to do it just because I'd been watching over Wally's shoulder for all that time. So that was cool. And then so emo was, yeah, definitely like I took a lot of, I just was like, I can do this myself. I've always done it myself. Why don't I just, why not, I'll just take it this extra and just do what feels good and sounds good to me, and then also have it mastered well. Then I was like, I'll find a good mastering engineer and just go and hang out. I got lucky. There was a guy who was like, yeah, I'll master your record, and we can do as many trials as you want. You can come here, sit with me, and we'll figure it out. And I did like maybe like 2 or 3 mastering sessions for emo, just to balance all of the different all the different songs together. And this guy was like super cool to me, and we did it in like the fucking Capitol building in LA. So it was like, but he was like, made it kind of cheap for me to do it. And like, it's great.
Nice.
I was really proud of emo when I finished it. And then my first child was born on the day that record was released. So life really changed then. It was nice.
But it's awesome because it has a cohesive sound. I think it was like recorded and mixed at your house and then 5 different studios, and it's nice how cohesive it is,
Oh, thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that.
But with Goodnight Unknown, you did like most of that just yourself, like recording and mixing, and then Mudrock helped you with like a few vocal takes and at the end.
Yeah, he helped. Yeah, he did some light. I mean, I worked with him on some of the stuff too, but that guy is like, he's funny. I mean, he lived in my neighborhood, and I was like, I think my conversation with him, he was like, I want to work on your record. I'm like, I have $5,000. I'm like, what can you do for $5,000? He's like, I'll do whatever you want. I'm like, okay.
Nice.
But I mean, I made it like really upfront. I was just like, because people can say like, you can come use my studio. It's like, well, okay. Number one, how much are you going to charge me? That I can use your studio, that's fine. But like, nothing's for free, So, but Mudrock, like right away, I was like, and he's funny too, because he cut his teeth like producing fucking new metal.
I know. I'm born in the late 80s, so I remember that shit.
I mean, yeah, all this, but I think
when I was a kid.
But the great thing about him was that he actually has an amazing ear. He has an
Right.
amazing EQing ear. So I was able to take these things that I had made, myself, and he would just immediately know where they sit sonically and how to get them all to fit together. And then I brought Dale Crover from the Melvins in to play drums, and he didn't know Dale. He's like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" I'm like, "It's Dale Crover,
What?
the architect of grunge," and he was like, "What?"
That's insane.
Dale's, he's, he created. So that was cool. I had a really Goodnight Unknown was I mean, I think it's whatever. People don't, I mean, not very many people reacted to that record, but I'm glad it exists. I did it.
Yeah. It's funny because when I listened to it for the first time, I couldn't discern Crover there because
Oh
he
no,
has a
you
very
can't. I wished I had, one of my main regrets of moving from Los Angeles was that because I'd finally like really, Dale and I had met almost like his dads. Like our kids were at the same daycare.
right.
I mean, I'd met him before that, but we really became friends when we both had children of roughly the same age and going to the same daycare. And then I was like, when I started to involve him creatively in what I was doing, I was like, oh my God. And then the last few times I worked with him, I played live drums with him, and I'm like, oh my, so much potential. But what's on Goodnight Unknown is really him being tamed, which is, unfortunate.
Yeah,
But he's
but like
there.
you have a different like okay, so he played on the Dumb Numbers albums as you did and Murph.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
super funny when I listen to these two Dumb Numbers album, I can hear exactly when Murph is playing and when Dale is playing. But
Oh
that's a
yeah,
more
no.
metal based, like stuff like the Melvins, Like the stuff
The-
on Goodnight Unknown, it's not as metal based. Maybe it would have been weird if he had been going like full Crover, you know what I
No, I
mean?
don't know. I think if he and I had done the live tracks together, I think it would have sounded amazing. Actually very musical drummer.
Yeah,
He's
one
totally
of the greats.
open-minded. He's not a metal guy. He's actually just like, he's kind of, I relate to him a lot because it's like, yeah, we have our like heavy bands, and we have the bands that I mean, like very similar to me in that like my original band, Dinosaur Jr. has been around for almost 40 years. They've been around for 40 years. So we have these things that we cut our teeth on, and we were sort of we our music was very, I mean, for lack of a better word, I guess influential, for like early grunge. Like both Dinosaur Jr. and Melvins really did have a lot to do with influencing people.
Mm.
And but both Dale and I really, I mean, he's very open-minded, and so I could have he'd do anything. I mean, Jesus, you could have. I mean, he's just a really good instinctual percussion player.
Yeah, he
So
brought really nice dynamics on the album for sure.
yeah, I would have liked to continue working with that.
Right. So another really nice dynamic was these music boxes that you took apart and kind of layered together.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
awesome. Like you were
Oh, thanks.
recording separate notes and layering them like
Yeah,
from different
yeah,
toys into chords and putting them onto a cassette, using
yeah,
the pitch control to make it in tune with the songs you were using. That's
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
intricate process, but like, and you have to sometimes listen for it, but it's just a really nice kaleidoscope blanket
Oh,
often in
nice.
back of the.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for noticing.
That was a really
Yeah,
good.
I got obsessed. That was like I think I was spending so much time with my kids, my daughter, and specifically, um, my son was born, he was born right after Goodnight Unknown was released. So my daughter is emo, my son is Goodnight Unknown.
Okay.
And so building up to Goodnight Unknown, my daughter, it was, she was 2, 3, 4 years old, and I was spending so much time with her. And the time that you spend with children it's really interesting. It's like it can be like if you really do it, it's I don't want to call it boring, but you have a lot of time. There's just a lot of empty space. It's like where you can't as an adult, or as a parent. I mean, if you want to experience those moments with the child, it's very it's interesting. It's very you're right in one moment. There's all this empty space, a lot of quiet, a lot of just listening, watching the child. And for me, I would just inevitably end up picking up her toys and just going like, "Oh, why don't I?" I found one toy that had given her, which was just it was the music box inside it was so beautiful that I ended up taking the box out of the toy and then recording it. And yeah, and then there was just so many things like that too that I just like I want to make, I'm going to use this somehow to remember this time.
Right. So I feel like your next two solo albums, the Brace the Wave and the Apocalypse Fetish EP, you kind of went back to your roots more with how they were recorded, like utilizing the ukulele a lot. Kind of
Yeah.
dictates the sound.
Yeah.
Like for those who
Yeah.
don't know, you string the uke with 4 guitar strings.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Do you always use the two thickest ones and the two lightest ones, or how is that?
Yeah, that's it. I started doing that in the 80s, like in 85.
Like, didn't your mom get your first uke for you or
She did. She
something?
handed it to me. She's like, I think you can use this, Louis. And I'm like, I think I can use it. I'm like, it was great. It was a really, really nicely made baritone ukulele. It was really solid.
Right.
And yeah, I was like, I had no interest in playing ukulele, like ding, ding, ding. I was like, no, I was like, this is perfect because it's a manageable guitar. And I had, at that point, I had already kind of arrived to the conclusion then, and actually on the regular guitars that I did have, I had I had started putting only 4 strings on them, and this baritone uke, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like this is great. And then I strung it up, and then yeah, then I developed then I just started writing off of that.
Well, do you have like a predominant tuning you've been using on the uke, or do you switch
Well,
it up a lot?
I started with a simple one, which was just 2 notes. It was like, I mean, I've streamlined. I mean, it really changes. I mean, it depends on
Okay.
the recordings. I can't go back. A lot of recordings, I don't even know. I would tune it just based on the songs. And then even within the song, if I was starting to overdub, I would change the tuning again for the overdubs. But if there was a very general tuning of D, A, A, D. So
Okay.
that was the general one. That's what I'll default to now in order to recreate a lot of my earlier material. I'll go to D A A D, but it's still not the exact tuning. It's still like I think I
Okay.
found the exact tuning recently, and it's not D A A D, but it's close. It's like close to that. But uh so and when I then I went to like a more complicated tuning, D G C D, and that's when I made a shift to playing. I made like a 4 string electric guitar for myself and strung it the same way, 2 heavies, two skinnies. And then I like made a more, DAAD was cool, but it was a little simplistic. And I thought DGCD would be the best. And then I started, the chord figures that I could figure out from there were cool. And that's when I started writing songs like Soul and Fire and a lot of the songs that are on uh
Bubble.
Smash Your Head on the Punk Rock leading into Bubblin's
Right.
Grade.
Okay.
And then and Bake Sale as well. Actually, there's quite a few on there. But the last time I had really done real 4 string stuff was for Bake Sale, like predominantly. Although, Emo, of course, has 4 string songs on it as well, and all of my home recordings. But I wanted to make a record where I brought back, for Brace the Wave and then Apocalypse Fetish, which were they're pretty much the same record. They should have be one record, but that didn't happen. But it could. But if the world ever wants me to do it, I would be happy to put Brace the Wave and Apocalypse Fetish together as one solid record. But
Right.
I really did. I was like, I just realized. I thought, I went back and I was just thinking about it, and I thought, well, what I haven't done is go into a studio and make full. Because even though, like you said, Brace the Wave and Apocalypse Fetish are me going back, but the difference is that I actually went to a studio. Like I went to a studio to work with my friend Justin Pizzaferrato, who was
Right.
he was the primary engineer for Dinosaur Jr. for a long time. So he and I had a real good bond. And I was like, I want to take my ukulele with this tuning and then take it to a studio, like to a real studio, big rooms, good microphones, and build 4 string songs that way. And yeah, I think yeah, I really enjoyed that, that was really, that was when I was like, I just thought that I really needed to bring that back because that's probably, for me, it's probably the thing that makes what I do, and hopefully in the future that will make what I do the most. It'll be one of the more interesting aspects of what I do, and maybe other people will do something like it because I think it makes it. I think one of the main things about music and the things that I'm always inspired by is like people who make things simple and accessible for you, you know, like the way that Neil Young can somehow make writing songs seem accessible, even though he writes the most beautiful, intricate, you know, full of intricate emotion songs, but it's all very simple, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not intimidating, and and I love the way the Ramones took, you know, an instrument and they made the guitar sound like nothing else that's ever before or really since. I mean, there are things that there's nothing quite like the way, but they were able to make something that could be, you know, at that point, you know, Ramones, I mean, this is at the beginning of Van Halen. So you have this obsession with virtuoso playing and you know, virtuosity and, you know, progressive rock and like all of this, you know, this constant moving and perfection. But then you can find artists that make things so simple and so powerful, like using simplicity. And then, so that for me, I think that my best recordings are very simple and come from a simple place, but they are complex. You know, like there's the right combination of overtones and lyrical content or whatever that can make it complex. Like you know.
I mean, I can hear the Johnny Ramone like influence in your strumming style,
Oh, for
especially
sure.
when you're playing the acoustic, you know.
Oh yeah. It's
Not
huge.
not as much when you're playing the electric guitar.
No,
It's really funny though because you're not known for like for your guitar skills, like you're known for other things more. When you go
right.
back and watch these Sebadoh live films, you're executing these licks and these drums like fucking seamlessly. No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah. I've always thought strumming has been the most interesting thing to me, and I don't know why people don't talk about it very much. They don't talk about how complex strumming can really be a big part of it and create all kinds of overtones and really
Mm.
be interesting, you know?
Mm.
And that was something that I developed from the Ramones and post-punk, you know? Like I thought the chording in post-punk was so interesting. You know, it's just breaking away from bar chords. I've never been into bar chords. I don't like bar chords. I mean, I know
Right.
that Johnny Ramone was bar chords, but he strummed every fucking string.
Yeah.
And then he had his own circular. I mean, I did actually play when I played hardcore, when I played in my hardcore bands, like my strumming was like so crazy and so fast that I can't I was not beyond the age of 20. I wasn't able to like physically replicate what I did because I did this crazy double strumming. I mean, you can kind of hear it on the Deep Wound record that we did do one record as Deep Wound with that strumming style. But like what I did, the strumming that I did there, I was pretty, you know, it was unusual. And it was Johnny Ramone. It was like Johnny Ramone times two, kind of.
Mm.
But I was, like I said, I was like, I wasn't able to physically like, I wasn't able to physically replicate it on electric guitar after the age of 20. So when I switched to ukulele and started to do, you know, experiment with like strummings on the ukulele, that's where I re-embraced the rhythmic aspect of that.
Mm.
So, you know, that's to me like I'm a huge part of my solo stuff and ukulele stuff is about, I mean, strumming and I obviously the way I play bass, you know, people think, you know, people will tell me like all you do is play chords on bass. I mean, which isn't entirely true, but when you see me play the bass, it looks like, yeah, like that it is all the chords, you know. But
Right.
yeah, strumming the bass, I kind of shifted. I think I really look, I mean, playing with Dinosaur Jr. is like a whole other world for me. And I love the way I love playing bass with, you know, to Murph's drumming.
Of
He
course.
and I have a connection that you know, it can't be, it's again, it's like, it's so particular to us and to he and I. And I'm really, you know, I like it when people like notice, you know, that it's different, you know.
What I think it's really interesting listening to the Deep Wound album is that you guys were very accomplished musicians at the time. And I think Jay was just like 18. You were a few months shy of turning 17 when you did that original
Yeah.
EP back in
Yeah.
'83. Did you
Yeah.
guys practice a lot?
Not a whole lot, but we did. You know, Jay, I mean,
Sounds sounds good.
we played a lot individually, you
Uh-huh.
know. Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, yeah, we were obsessed. I mean, we were just obsessed with music and we wanted to be a good hardcore band. That was just and Jay was a great drummer. I mean, he's a really good musician,
But
you
he's
know.
also doing these blast beats on some of the songs, you
Oh
know.
yeah. But
But
he's doing
like,
them different. Like he too, like the way he is actually playing them is not like it's not the style that people do play, but like the what his it's kind of similar to my strumming, like the way that he played hardcore drums is like, and the way I played hardcore guitar, like they're not, it's just not typical to what that style was, because a lot of it was just almost just like polka beat, like do 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 do, like one ba 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 ba. But he would do this crazy thing where he would
right.
individual with his his right hand on the hi-hat
Yeah,
would sort of brush it like in a way that
right.
was made it more indistinguishable. So he's
Yeah,
not even like what he's doing. His right and left hand are not like 1 2 1 2 1 2. It's more just like he I mean it actually made it hard to follow him when we did play live,
uh,
because he wasn't doing these very strict hi-hat hits. He was just
right.
making this like, which was brilliant. That was
Yeah,
like his way around it. And like nobody, and it's funny, him trying to describe his drumming style from that time is like me trying to describe my guitar style. It's like you're like, yeah, but I didn't,
mm.
yeah, it's Johnny Ramone, but it's like it's
It does
Greg
crank.
Ginn.
It
It's
really
like it's
cranks
just
up the intensity of the music for sure. The drumming, it makes it
yeah, oh,
much more
yeah,
interesting. You know what I mean?
no, totally. He was it was crazy getting that we connected, and to meet someone like him who was just he was as devoted. I mean, it was my friend Scott and I in high school, and we were two kids like obsessed with Minor Threat and Black Flag and all this shit. And
Mm,
just to connect with some other kid who was like equally obsessed,
right,
and then just wanted to play,
right.
so
But then when he starts writing those Dino songs, and you get in on bass, had you played bass a lot before that?
no, no.
Okay.
He was kind of like, I want you to play bass. And I'm like, okay.
Uh-huh.
So I got a bass, and I started to play with my friend Scott from Deep Wound. He played drums, so I played bass to his drumming, because I was like Jay kind of gave me the directive, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I felt like I should shift. I felt so my first thing to do was I couldn't really play with like Jay and I. He was going to he'd started his first year of college, so we didn't really have a whole lot of time to like really practice initially with Dinosaur Jr. So what I did initially was pick up the bass and start playing with my friend Scott, who was he was the bass player of Deep Wound, but he started playing drums. So he and I became like a rhythm section. And then we found there was this kid that we ate lunch with who was obsessed. I mean, he was like fucking obsessed with Metallica. It was like he was because Metallica had just hit. I mean, it was just the speed metal scene had just started. It was like 1984. And that's when the real split started, when it was like, when all the underground metal started to go overground, and speed metal started to happen. So hardcore itself, it's like there was people like we couldn't hardcore was so it was such a short it was a short very short wonderful period where that was the only thing that we wanted to do. But I think on either side it's like, if you just continue to play hardcore, it was boring. It was like, for people who loved metal, they were like, I love hardcore, but I want to make it more metal. And for people who really loved the noise aspects of hardcore, they were like Jay and I were like, we want to make more extreme melodic music. It's like we like you. So there was kind of this split between where you wanted to take that initial burst of energy from hardcore. You wanted to diversify it. Like
Mm,
and I think Metallica were a beautiful example of that. They were very influenced by punk, but they
mhm.
took it, they were like, no, we want to be, we want to we want to be more like Iron Maiden, or like we want to be more of like they like metal more, so they went metal, and then us weirdos went like, like no, we want to make some fucking crazy collision of all kinds of shit. And
Right.
so I took my hardcore way of playing guitar and kind of mutated it to the bass. And I had
Yeah.
I had a very short-lived band in high school with this kid Wayne, who was very particular about his guitar and very particular about his Metallica records and his metal records. And we had a fun band called Wayne and the Wangs. We played a show. Jay actually came to the show. We played at University of Massachusetts in the dining hall, and Jay came and saw us play, and then was maybe like, wow, I guess Lou's really doing this, or Lou's playing bass. So
But
then,
were you starting to do that style, your strumming style back then, or on the bass?
yeah, I was
Uh-huh.
playing with a pick. I was playing with a
Okay.
pick. And I
Because on
think the thing is that when Jay asked me to play, I think that the one thing for sure was like ground zero was Lemmy, like Motorhead. Like,
right,
that was the thing that really brought us all together. It was like
right.
Motorhead brought everybody together, and Lemmy and that style of bass playing was like, this isn't thumpy bass. This is in your face bass.
Yeah,
And Jay like made that pretty clear right away. It's like, I want in your face bass. And we're
yeah.
like, okay. So,
I
and I
mean,
was like, oh,
Lemmy was also playing through like a Marshall guitar amp, you know?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
he would so much of what I did initially with Dinosaur Jr. was inspired by Lemmy, inspired by a lot of other things too, because we loved everything. So there was
Hmm.
I mean, the amount of records that we were listening to and all the different styles that we were absorbing was, we were
Right.
huge music lovers, but we were not obsessed with one thing. We were obsessed with everything. But
Sure,
Lemmy for sure was like, he was ground zero. Like, that's where you're going to start. That's where I'm going to start. My approach to bass is going to be from hardcore guitar and Lemmy.
sure.
So
Because for me, I can discern a little bit of that style, but I feel like you really nailed that shit on You're Living All Over Me, like doing these four string chords like all over the place. That's when,
yep.
you know,
Yeah. And Jay wrote a lot. Jay wrote a lot of, not a whole, I think it's about half and half on that record. Jay composed songs like, this is the bass part. I mean, on the first record, he was like,
ah,
this is the bass part.
mm,
he gave me a lot to work with.
okay.
And then with You're Living All Over Me, that record was more collaborative. And I came up with my own bass lines for like Raisins in a Jar.
Hmm.
Um, but the other ones like Little Fury Things was Jay's
Mm,
lines. I don't know.
okay. With the original Closer Polito, did you write that one specifically for the album, or was it something you had like already
No,
written and recorded?
I kind of written it and recorded it, and I think when I was finishing the song, when I was finishing it and just feeling this, like, I was like, I mean, I was, it was a really, I mean, it was, for lack of a better word, like making that piece, making Polito was like a real spiritual awakening. Like, I just became, I heard voices, it was like, and the voices were like, you need to ask Jay to put this on the record. I'm like, oh God, I can't. It's so crazy. I can't ask him. It's like, you need to ask him to put this on the record. It makes sense. You need to do. I'm like, I felt such a sense of purpose, and like, and it wasn't easy for me to do that because Jay was a very, very powerful figure. I mean, like, at that time, because he was like dressing amazing, and he was like writing all these insane fucking songs, and really advanced. He was super advanced, just
Mm,
without a doubt, in almost every way. Like, he was just musically super advanced. He was dressing like fucking Nick Cave. I mean, like, or cooler. He was like some fucking crazy. He was dressing like Nick Cave and Neil Young combined. It
mm,
was so crazy. Like, his clothing was like, his style game was like through the fucking roof. Like, his hair was he would stick his hair up and wear big fucking leather belts and like paisley shirts, and like, but with boots, like fucking Doc Martens. And he was just, I try to say this, like, I can barely, I really try to say this to people. And whenever I say it around Jay, he gets really like, that's not true. Like he gets really defensive. But I'm telling you, like what he did style wise was like equal to what he did with his music at the time, which is like pretty significant. Like, cause he was writing songs that were like collisions of styles. And he was taking, we were listening to, Neil Young and REM and a lot of this early jangly music, and then just taking it and jamming it into fucking Black Sabbath and even Metallica, and even that kind of speed metal aesthetic and jamming them together. And stylistically, it was the same. I mean, he was he looked so cool. And he was super cute too. He was like really just good looking kid, and he was skinny and fucking mean, would say really mean shit and was like, I mean, he was so intense. And I loved him. I was like, oh God, I love this guy so much. I'm so scared of him. And but he, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was really happy to be his foot soldier, in that band.
What I think is cool about Pulido, it's like kind of it introduces a little more dense lyricism than the rest of the record.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, that's me, that's like,
That's what I'm
I was
saying.
very, yeah, I was me. I was like, I wanted to be really personal. I
Yeah,
wanted to be complete. Like Jay was like writing these songs that I thought were, to me, they were equivalent to the like Bob Dylan that I was listening to or discovering at the time. But I think I was like, I wanted to go more in the direction of, I thought hardcore punk rock was very, very personal. I thought some of the bands were incredibly personal and said very, very sensitive things and were very, very sensitive.
yeah.
And I also, I mean, what I took from, um, you know, pop music in the 70s was like, I loved like John Denver and soft
Hmm.
rock. I fucking loved sensitive songs, like really sensitive, like, oh, like sad
Yeah,
songs. I
yeah.
really, really loved that. And I thought that, honesty was really, and I've loved songs that seemed completely honest and where Jay was writing these, I mean, really, they were also very honest and very direct, but they were, just with that kind of edge, that little bit of separation, and I was just like, I want to strip any separation between me and this music. I want this music to be me. That's it. If you hear this, you're hearing me. And it was my way of, I couldn't communicate with people otherwise. I was a very shy person. So I took my music to be very much like, this is me. If you like this, maybe you'll like me. Hey, you like it? Come talk to me. And
Mm.
that's actually how I made so many of my friends was making my early friends, even John Davis. I made it because he responded. I made the Weed Forestin cassette right on the heels of Your Living of Polito. And that's when I put that cassette together. And when I sent it out, it was like, whoever responds to me, hopefully people, that was I even put it on the cassette. It was like a personal plea to a special someone.
Mm.
And John Davis responded. Bob Fay responded. He became the drummer for Sebadoh. My first wife loved Polito. She came up to me at a Dinosaur Jr. show and we started dating. And, I've met some of the most, important people in my life because that's how I put myself out there, was that music. So,
Because like even there were artists prior to you who recorded lo-fi acoustic music, but I really have to rack my brain to find artists with similar lyrics approach. Like if you look at Wheat Forest and both
yeah.
the imagery and like the whole vibe, the deadpan honesty, and it's definitely self-reflective and
Yeah.
confessional, but also
Right.
self-grandiose and it's slightly messianic in places.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're singing
Yeah.
about masturbation in this deadpan way, which makes it so fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Like the mix of the music and what you were doing with like the samples and the tweaking of the on the four track with
Yeah. The set, like the speed of the
the
voices
pitch
and
shift. Yeah,
yeah, the
it's
pitch shift
definitely
stuff.
it's
Yep.
definitely a original piece of art for sure.
That was, I really, yeah, that was my message. I felt very, yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think, um, you just described all the things that I wanted to touch on with that too. It's like I wanted it to be, I wanted it to have the edge of like, messianic edge, that kind of like, I wanted to get it all in there and sort of, and to really, to really, to be kind of complicated. The music is simple, but I think, there's just so many parts of it that point to like how complex it is, that nobody's simple. I'm not trying to make myself seem simple. I'm not trying to like make myself seem sensitive. If I do, I want to also undercut it with like how my brain can cut things up and how I can be cruel and how how morality is so fluid and I was reacting a lot to like I had a very pretty religious upbringing and I really was like I was making my spiritual break, from that stuff too. And I was doing a lot of things that I would have thought were forbidden, so that was like a really big part of it as well, was like really separating myself from my religious upbringing and then also just trying to reduce my amount of shame and like somehow by exposing myself that somehow I was going to just devalue all of the shame and self-hatred that I felt. I just wanted to, yeah, I think that was a really big part of that record, Weed Forestin, was to really begin the process of stripping away a lot of the shit that I grew up with,
Mm. And also with the samples and the stuff, I feel like you tread kind of in the middle, like it never becomes campy or novelty or silly. Like I feel
Right.
like just enough
That's cool.
tat or spooky or you know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you. I think you understand. You get it.
Was that
There's
something
people that get it.
was that something to start to take shape as you recorded the album, or did it have like a preconceived idea so how the overall album should sound or resonate?
No, it was just a collection of stuff that I had done. It just
Yeah,
happened to fit together. I realized that it
right,
was fitting together well, and I was also really, I was really obsessed with swans. You
right.
know, really, because they had a similar like. I really related to swans, like because they had lyrics that were just like, what? Did he just say that? I mean, like it's very, very heavy, very basic music. I mean, it's very basic, very simple. But again, like it was like this music was about torture, self-hatred. And
Right.
and Swans, I think too, they had begun this sort of interesting progression from very violent lyrics and violence and then slowly they put out a record called Children of God where it was just like where this almost cultish aspect of started to come through, a lot of religious imagery, but at the same time like this sort of light cracking through to the music
Mm.
and but maintaining a simplicity that I really related to. I really related to how Michael Jura was just like, I am taking every step and you are coming with me on every step. We're moving towards ourselves. I know I took it so seriously and I loved that. So I really felt like I was like this I think the reason that I called it Weed Forestin too was that it had nothing to do with marijuana, although marijuana was a huge part of my life. But the title Weed Forestin, like it's referring to like, because while I was working with Jay and then listening to things like the Swans, which both were like monolithic, really. Like Jay's talent was like monolithic and his songs were like extremely advanced. And I considered these things like, the Swans were simply like these statues, like are just edifices of power. And Jay was like a forest, he was like just a forest of like a big trees and a canopy, I mean like a dark canopy and caves and I felt like the music that I was making was like grass, it was like it's just weeds. They're like little weeds, like a little patch, like
Mm.
this is my scale. My scale is down, like it's small, so I'm weeds while I'm weeds in among these forests. So I was like, but this is where I'm like taking my weeds, but I'm like these little growths, but I'm treating them like trees. I am going to take this seriously. I'm not gonna like I'm not gonna put myself down because it's simple. I'm not gonna like this is where I'm starting. This is a legitimate step. And like the
Mm.
swans were like so had illustrated so beautifully that everything was a step, like a very deliberate step. And I thought, it's time for me to make my first deliberate step and to acknowledge the scale of it was it was part of something that I thought was funny, and it was also very true, you know. And
Do you
I didn't even think about it being part of like marijuana. That's so funny. I didn't think about it for years after
Oh,
that.
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like, of course it could be.
Do you feel like you were kind of starting to embrace your own voice, like with wheat foresting, you
Oh
know?
yeah.
Like,
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I had always loved the sound of my own voice, even when I was a
right,
kid, just like with tape recorders. I loved it. I mean,
right.
I loved DJs on the radio. Really loved messing with my voice. I had a very good friend of mine, one of my best friend through my early years, like when I was, you know, like from the age of like 7 to 12, actually beyond that too, but he was just an excellent mimic. And we just, so much of what we did together was just playing with our voices and imitating things, imitating commercials, watching cartoons, imitating cartoons,
Mm,
listening to shortwave radio. I mean, I just loved so by the time that I got my 4 track, I was very acclimated to my own voice.
right.
Then with like marijuana, like just pot just had a way of like stripping everything away and making this sense of this focus possible, like a singular focus.
Mm,
Because that's one of the biggest one of the detractors from attention, or is like when you're just hearing all these voices and you're hearing like criticisms in your head before you even start. And I really felt really strongly, and I still do, about THC to a degree. It's like it can really just shut the fucking world out, you know.
yeah,
I mean, it could also make you the most spacey person ever and totally distracted and never and hear too many voices. But I think when you initially embrace the drug, it can be extremely focusing and also like make you and also just be like embrace yourself, you know, just embrace who you are. I mean, and I think I think it's really amazing that way. And that's what it did for me. It quieted my mind and it made me
right,
focused and it made music sound so good. I mean, it was just loved it. I loved the way music sounded and then to make my own music was just, that was, you know, it was what it just calmed me down. It gave me focus and calmed me down and made me feel better about myself, you know?
right. You know what I think is really interesting about also wheat foresting, even when it's not overtly psychedelic, like many of the songs have this very subtle psychedelic flavor, just in the way some of the songs are structured and the lyrics, you know, are delivered. I've
Yeah.
never listened to that album on psychedelics, but I can just imagine that like really blowing your fucking mind and even freaking you out. The words that
Yeah.
you're and how, even though it's just you and acoustic guitar, just the way it comes together, you know.
Yeah. No, I felt really powerful when I was making those songs,
Mm,
even though it's such a modest way of putting things together and it's very simple. And
right.
um yeah, but I felt powerful. I don't know what it is. I felt like the voice. I felt I mean, I was doing it for, I mean, one of the main objectives of doing that music was to make it and then listen to it. It was to get, actually, a lot of times what I would do is make the music where I was more or less sober, you know, and then finish it and then get extremely stoned and then hear it as if it was somebody else. You know what I mean? Like hear it like I
Right.
loved it. Like listening to like really constructing the music but like I said, like um, being straight enough to create it, you know, to actually do the process of recording and because I think I did take a lot of care with the balance and the way things were recorded. I didn't, I was very particular. As lo-fi as it was like, it was not haphazard. I can say that every move that I made was very deliberate and the result of like a lot of experimentation with mic placement and stuff like that, and really getting to know that machine that I was working with and knowing how to like effectively bounce tracks and doing it well. which is something that you do need a presence of mind to have. So I did a lot of the execution would be more or less sober, and then but the joy was like getting really wasted and listening to it.
Right.
So I loved it. It was very masturbatory in that way. In so many aspects it was wonderful. I loved it.
Nice. I was thinking I want to be mindful of our time.
Hmm.
Would you mind if we did like just part two of this, so like some other time? Because there's like
I could
there's a,
still talk for another 40 minutes or so if you want. I mean,
really
yeah, I don't know. It'd probably be easier to just do it, blow through it. I'm like talking about it. So,
cool, man. Let's do that.
okay.
I think the link, the uh the Zoom link will expire in like 25 minutes, you know.
Okay. Okay.
So, all right,
Yeah.
cool.
If that's enough for you. That's cool. I mean, I'll talk as much. I mean, I'm rolling now, so it's like we might as well do it.
Awesome. So you and Eric got together as early as 86, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I
Like,
mean, actually, we'd met each other in 1984, probably.
all right,
He was part of the hardcore scene locally here, and he had a band called Gray Matter that he was in. There was another
right.
band called Gray Matter. It's not the same. But Eric, he wrote a fanzine. He had a really funny fanzine. Um, yeah, I met Eric, and then we just became friends because I don't know, he knew Dinosaur Jr. You know, he was a Dinosaur Jr. fan,
Right.
and he knew about my tape stuff. And then he told me about his tape stuff, and I was like, hey, let's get together and do tape stuff, you know. And it began as like making a compilation cassette of some of his songs and some of my songs. I thought that was a good way for us to kind of
Was that the Friedman you're talking about
the
then?
Friedman that
Okay.
began as a 30-minute cassette that we put out and we sold in a
Okay.
local record store. And
When do you,
go ahead.
when do you reckon Sebadoh played their first show?
Um, Not too long after that. We did duo shows initially where we played Weed Forestin and where he would play the simple drums. And he's on the record actually. He's on some of the recordings that I made then.
Right.
He played drums, and it was just kind of like me. He was like supporting me as a really basic drummer. And we did a couple of shows that way, which were like pretty fucking cool. Like
Right.
we did them at like it was like an art project. It was so fucking cool. It was like, you know, we were just really, I was super weird. I mean, non-communicative, you know, and that was, you know, Dinosaur Jr. We were around, you know, I did this while it was happening. And so Eric and I kind of created this thing. And Eric really, I think he really liked the sort of religious aspect of what I was doing, like the Jesus stuff. And we uh we talked about that a lot, and we went to some Bible studies together. We
Right.
went, like we were really, I don't know what it was like we were kind of like these weird Christian, like psychedelic Christians. I don't even like it didn't last for too long, you know, but there was just our initial meeting was like really flavored with this like because we were tripping too. Like I didn't trip as much as he did, like, but we had some pretty intense acid trips together. Like, I mean, that were they were really intense. They were intense to the point that, like, in a weird way, they are what broke us up, our acid trips together, because things occurred between us that were like such intense conversations that Eric would bring up things that had occurred in those trips like 5 years later, and I'd be like, "Hey, dude, like, dude, we were tripping. I don't know.
Okay.
It's okay. I love you. I don't know."
Mhm.
It's like, but it was like I mean, he's a very unique person, so that stuff was hard for him. He was uh, but we made this kooky. We just had this kooky hookup and started playing shows as a duo, like Weed Forestin style, with him on two drums with a blanket on him, and then and me playing ukulele and and four-string guitar. And then and then when I got kicked out of Dinosaur in '89, he was like, "We got to be a band." And I'm like, "I don't want to be a band." He's like, "We got to be a band." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "I got a drummer." And we went and watched Jason Lowenstein play drums. He was playing in a band that sounded exactly like Husker Du. And
Okay.
Jason was playing drums, and he looked just like Grant Hart, and he was singing and drumming. And he's like, "That's the kid. He loves our tape." He's got to be in the band. And I'm like, okay. And I think Jason was like 15, 16.
Right.
So, I mean, I can keep going with the the chronological part of this, but I don't know if you got something
No,
particular
it's
you
just
want.
no. Like, was the Asshole EP? That's the first thing that Jason played on, or do you remember?
Yeah, I guess it was.
Okay, but
I
then
get,
you did Gimme
wait.
Indie Rock. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess it would be. I mean, Asshole was my song. My side was my song, my
Yeah,
4-track songs, like
yeah.
which I was, those are still to this day, I'm like, I don't know, those are pretty good. I really like those songs on that EP. They're pretty complex, and I love the recording and just how fucking angry they are. It's fucking so funny, but uh yeah, so Jason started to contribute a little bit to, but then Eric was really like, we got to be a band. So we did form a three-piece.
Okay.
And then the idea too was that I mean, Eric Gaffney on drums was like so fucking, I mean, Jason's a great drummer. Eric is like a great drummer, but like really unpredictable, which I
Mm,
really liked. And Jason's a multi-instrumentalist. I mean, Jason Lowenstein, in my mind, I mean, it hasn't quite played out this way. I wished it did, but I think Jason is one of the most talented people I've ever met. And he's a great songwriter and he's a wonderful singer. Like, he just never really, I don't think he's ever really embraced himself as
mm,
that. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know why he never, why he doesn't have, a million solo records. And I don't understand. To this day, because he's written some of the best songs that Sebadoh ever recorded. And he's just truly like, anyway, he played bass. He was a great bass player. So the combination of me on like 4-string electric, Jason on bass, and Eric Gaffney on drums was like, I mean, that's the best thing that I've like instrumentally that I had done. And some things that we did do together, like they begin to approach like what happened with Dinosaur Jr.
right. So you were doing four-string electric guitar on those first Sebadoh releases.
Yes.
All
Yeah,
right.
like, yeah, I mean, we reissued, the Freed Band came out, then Weed Forestin, and then Sebadoh 3. Yeah, that was
Right.
like, there are some exceptions. I did do some 6-string guitar stuff too, but
Right.
a lot of it was predominantly like weird tunings, even on the bass. We did weird for Sebadoh 3, it's weird. The bass is tuned differently.
Right.
Eric Gaffney's playing a 5-string amplified acoustic guitar. I'm playing 4-string on some of it. Or that's actually a lot of my home recordings on Sebadoh 3, but the ones that I did live with the band, were kind of a mix. Yeah. And then, then we kind of became more of a live band at that point, and then the record started to reflect that.
Right. It's interesting on Sebadoh 3 because it's like 23 songs, but I think you only recorded like 10 of them in the studio. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
third of the songs were just you playing and recording everything. So it was kind of a
Mm-hmm.
collage album, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yep, yeah. I love collage. That was my favorite record, ever. I think I could say probably my favorite record is a record called "Wanna Buy a Bridge," which was a compilation from Rough Trade Records that came out in 1980.
Okay.
And it's a mix of like post-punk bands, punk bands. There's a band called Young Marble Giants on it, which are one of the most, I mean, I can't even, the influence that band had on me, I can't, just minimal lo-fi, like it's a huge, the record is amazing. So I really like the records that I really appreciated the most when I was growing up were compilation records. So
Mm.
when it came to Sebadoh making records, I was like, I really felt pretty strongly that records should be like this absolutely disjointed, like you're just thrown into a journey and you don't know what corner it's going to take. And the idea of almost every track being a different band was really inspirational for me. So when Sebadoh began making records, began making albums, I did consciously want to replicate that. So,
I mean, it's interesting how you guys share the instrument duties on that album. Like, you play most of the bass, Jason does a
Mhm.
handful of it. Same with the drums. Jason does the lion's share. Eric does a few tracks. And you and
Yeah.
Eric handle most of the guitars and vocals. Jason also does. I don't remember like any indie rock band from the 90s that functioned like that. It's like very brotherly divided. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, we did it live too. I mean, it made things really chaotic, but we did it
Right.
live. I mean, we had the band was a really, that initial, like that idea of the band, until Eric left. I mean, actually, I mean, it certainly continued after Eric left with Jason and I, because Jason became but that initial thing of like three people that all wrote, and we're all like, I mean, like kind of equal in our own ways, like, because that shit Eric did back then too, like I can't believe how fucking crazy and good it is and how bizarre. And I mean, and it's funny too, because I've met a few, like I talked to Steve Malkmus recently, and then Isaac Brock from Modest Mouse, and they're both of them are like, what's Eric doing? Like, what's happening? I mean, like his songs, I think his approach is more influential in sort of a background way than people realize, with Sebadoh, and like how much he really did. Eric's approach to music really did inspire some people, like really, because I became almost very normal compared to what Eric was doing
Yeah.
electrically. But
Yeah. You
it's,
can you can hear it on Bubble and Scrape. Like you can have toned it down and Eric's going fucking nuts on that album.
yeah, it's that record is, I can't believe that. I've gone back and listened to that recently, and I'm like, oh my God, Eric's stuff is the best shit on this record.
But also these EPs from 90, like these 4 EPs you did in 91 and 92. That's a really good, like, like
Yeah,
glad you guys put that shit out because it's,
yeah, it was fun, it was fun. I really
with
I wanted the band to be kind of, yeah, just, I wanted it to be a crazy band, unpredictable.
with the songs that you recorded, re-recorded the old kind of Sebadoh acoustic songs. Did you
Mhm.
kind of decide which ones to re-record? Because those are all songs that you sang on.
Yeah, I just thought they were the strongest ones.
Uh,
I thought Brand New Love, I was like, oh, this is like actually a pop song. I'm really, in that instance, I thought the electric version was really good. I thought that we really kind of killed the electric version. I'm like, that is pretty powerful.
yeah.
It's
Wasn't
pretty
that kind of
psychedelic.
like a underground hit?
I guess it was in a
Uh,
way. Yeah.
uh,
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, that song as a lo-fi song had its own life. Because I know when I met, when I met like Beck or whatever, Beck was like into that. Beck was into Weed Forestin. And, like a little, we had, we did, we did like, people noticed, there were some people that noticed, and a lot of really like creative people who, that's part of their, I've had, several people who I really respect just say like, hey, I really love, Weed Forest. That early Sebadoh stuff was really important to me.
right.
And then, which is exactly what I was talking about. It's like, you want to do things that inspire other people, and for other people to take that inspiration and make things even better. It's like,
Right. I think it's funny because I heard like from some people who went and saw you after you released Sebadoh 3, and they
yeah,
were like thinking we're gonna see like a cute like pop outfit, and we're met with this like scathing feedback fucking freak out. And yeah,
really.
so yeah, and even that EP Oven is My Friend, it's got like this really nice, like super nice, violent, distorted vibe to it. Like the
Oh
zero
yeah.
concern about alienating your core audience. It's quite refreshing, actually.
Oh yeah. No, that was the spirit of the times. We loved, I think the music that really translated best to me at that point was like aggressive music. So I could make acoustic recordings all day long, and I did, but when it came to like live music, I felt the stage was actually like a battleground. I thought that was what it was meant to be. I thought you were
Um,
meant to like you walk out on stage and like, I mean, we had a lot of shows that were like ended and people heckling us, assaulting audience members, fighting us fighting our, within the band. We played a show once where Eric just walked off the stage and started throwing rocks at Jason and I. I mean, it wasn't like super crazy. We weren't like Van Halen crazy or anything. Like when you really read about, it's pretty low level, but there was an aggression to what we did. And there was like a real sense of like confrontation, like all the time. I mean, it's funny to think about now, but
you got a kick out of it at the time, right? Like kind of challenging the audience.
yeah, I did. I mean, I wanted to be, I think mostly it's like we had some shows that would be beautiful, you know, like really great interaction, super sweet, but it's like, you know, it was every day was different. You know what I mean? It's like real life, you know, like every day when you're like fucking in your 20s or, you know, every day it's like today's a good day and you have this like fucking fantastic day where everything falls in the right way and you have wonderful conversations with people, make some new friends, you know, drink some beers, have a fucking great time, pass out, you know, and then the next day can be like fucking darkness from like, you're like, you know, you're in a fucking gas station and you're having some sort of kind of aggressive exchange with a cashier, and then it leads to some guy in the band is hungry and he doesn't get food quick enough, and then you're at a show, you get at a club and the sound guy is an asshole and nobody comes and like so and it's like every day, you know, it could just go any way. Like we had no, and I think we felt very much almost like entitled or beholding or responsible to make the show be the day. like, and I didn't even really think about it until a friend of ours was touring with us. He's like, man, do you realize like the show, how much your show is affected by what happens during the day? And I'm like, no. It's like, no,
Okay.
dude. Like you know, and everything, it all just hinged on, because it was, especially with Sebadoh, it was like three guys, and especially with Eric Gaffney, like you're talking three people, three really different people. And you know, it was just all of those energies balancing, or it was, you know, some nights Eric would be like, I don't want to play my songs today. You're like, okay, you don't have to play your songs today.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, I mean, it was just like everybody had power. I mean, that was the thing. It's like everybody had the power. There was no leader necessarily. But I think what made it confusing and probably what broke the bands up, I mean, or what made it difficult over the years is like the fact that I was singled out, you know. I was singled out as the primary songwriter, and because I did write the songs that would become, you know, the ones most played or the most easily digestible songs, let's put it that way,
Sure.
were mine. And so there was sort of a natural, like people naturally kind of made me the sort of leader, but that's not how we functioned. You know, the band really functioned. But when you introduce that, if the outside world is pumping that in, it's almost impossible for, you know, it would be impossible for Eric and Jason to be ignorant of that or not let that affect them, you know.
Right.
So that's probably the saddest part of Sebadoh, is that as much as I wanted it to be this equal collective and for us all to work together and ferociously together and band together as almost like these weird dysfunctional brothers, the outside world, you know,
Yeah.
intervenes.
That's a good thing about it, though. You got like a couple of really
Got a couple
prolific
of good ones.
years. Yeah.
We got a couple of, that's what I think about. I'm like, well, you know, we got a couple of good years in. All that
Is there a
matters.
reason why you didn't like record another album with Eric when he joined in the mid 2000s?
Um, I was so busy with Dinosaur Jr. And I think also Eric's or Jason seemed to have no interest in that. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I think um I have a lot of patience for people. Like I have a lot of patience for like idiosyncratic people. I have a lot of patience for like demanding people. Um, but not everybody does.
Right.
And if we were to like, I mean, if we were to have done that, we could have, but Eric was he was difficult. He was difficult, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I mean, and he also like didn't seem to have any real interest in devoting himself to being a drummer anymore. He was like, I'm not a drummer. I was like,
Okay.
to me, I'm like, you are a drummer and you're a great drummer.
Right.
so play the drums. He's kind of like, I mean, he was very, he just, he's just a very, uh, he's got his own, yeah, he didn't, I don't think he thought he was a drummer anymore. And
Right.
that for me, it's like, well, if you're not a drummer, I'm not going to fucking make a record with you. And I'm like,
Okay.
if you're not going to drum on my songs, then I don't,
Right.
And it was
Because
like when yeah. Go
no, keep
ahead.
going.
When he quit the band, I mean, he quit the band initially because he was like, you don't get to play on any of my songs. I'm not going on tour, and you're going to give me a third of the record advance. And I'm like, that's not happening. It's like, I'm like, you don't, I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's got to be, I mean, I'm all for like fully, I was totally all into fucking enabling that guy and making anything possible for him. But
Right.
man, I was like, no. And then it was, we would go on. I mean, we got to the point where we were going on tour and he was like selling his own merch. I'm like, I can't,
Okay.
making his own shirts and selling his, I'm like, I can't, it's like, at some point, yeah, but it can't, the point of this is not you moving further away and doing less and less and less. The point is that hopefully we move closer and closer together and become more and more of a collective. But that's just, I realized that was completely unrealistic. So.
Right. It was just like a year after Bob joined, Bob D'Amico, you just did the EP and then the album like right away.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, well, with him, I mean, Bob is a drummer. Like Bob is not like, I mean, Bob
Right.
definitely makes a contribution to the records, like he contributed one song on each of those records that we did.
Mm.
But he and Jason had been working together for years before that. They were the rhythm section for the Fiery Furnaces for quite a while.
Right.
And Jason and Bob were friends. They were like really good friends in New York. So we had that momentum. Jason and Bob had a momentum, and when I came into that mix and Bob became the drummer of Sebadoh, it pretty quickly, like it just took us maybe a year of playing together. And then we became really, then I was like, okay, we're ready, like, because you kind
Mm.
of have to, you need that time to acclimate, I think, as a rhythm section, as someone that I play, that plays drums to me playing guitar, like, and we did that, and I think, when we did the Act Surprise record, I thought we were pretty integrated
Yeah.
as a band.
What I think is really cool about these two last Sebadoh albums, you're kind of really bringing the Dino bass style into them. Like you had
Yeah.
done it in the 90s, but like I think Defend Yourself, that's the most bass heavy Sebadoh
Oh,
album
cool.
for sure.
Oh, yeah.
You
No, I
think it
mean,
was like an influence of being with Dino, or did you make a conscious
definitely.
decision?
No, I mean, well, I mean, initially when I played bass with Sebadoh, I just picked up where I left off with Dino. I didn't,
Right.
I'm like, I didn't, I mean, with Folk Implosion, when I play bass, I consciously, I'm like, I'm only playing with my fingers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Right.
only going to play with my fingers. Although, even on the new record, that's a little bit different. Actually, there's a bit of a Dino influence on the new Folk Implosion record simply because I went from one to the, but now that I'm playing with Folk Implosion again, like we're playing live shows and certainly all the stuff that we recorded in the 90s, I very consciously took a totally different approach, played a totally different bass,
Right.
played strings with my fingers, made a very conscious decision to play differently than Dinosaur Jr. But with Sebadoh, it's like, I mean, we were actually a Dinosaur Jr. influenced band. I mean, that's kind of the core of it, really. That Jason was a Dinosaur fan. Eric was a Dinosaur fan. The influences were similar. So there was no
Right.
need. I didn't make any kind of conscious decision to not play like I played with Dinosaur Jr.
Right.
So when we did come, and then when we really locked in with Bob D'Amico and it became a band, I mean, yeah, I didn't think twice about just picking, playing like that, strumming it.
Do you think Sebadoh like will make another album or go back on tour in the future? Are you
I
still
don't know.
active?
I'm kind of leaving that up to the world. The world has to show me. The world, if the world wants us, we'll come. And when I say if the world wants us, I mean literally like we need the world to come in and go, okay, like something like, I don't know, we want you to play Primavera for $30,000.
It's like something
Got to
like
be
that.
something like, it has to be, we need money. We need money to like, Because all the tours that we did leading up to now was always just the three of us in a van. And now they're for health issues, like Jason has health issues.
Mm,
Um, I'm old, and I mean it's like the amount of work that you do when it's just three people on the road
mm,
is like tremendous. And so we need help. We need to hire somebody to drive with us, help with merch, and that's really expensive. We'd need enough for a vehicle that was big enough for that. I mean, it's again, it all comes down to practicality. It's like it doesn't because I can't go out with I can't do anything with Dinosaur Jr. that's going to be or excuse me with Sebadoh that's going to like cost me money. I just can't. As much as I would like to be able to do that, and I would, I mean, if I had like, because there was a period when Dinosaur Jr. did get back together again, and initially in 2005,
mhm.
there was money. It was like the money that we were getting to do these shows was considerable. And
Right.
I took a lot of that money, the money that I made, and I devoted myself to reuniting the original Sebadoh. So that's why Eric Gaffney came
Oh,
back.
okay,
Because I
nice.
I I put out I mean, I outlaid like a lot of money to make that happen. And then also I had a lot of negotiations to do with Eric, so I had to do a lot of that to get him to come back into the fold, back to the band. And then I had to provide like an outlay of money in order to make it happen. And that was largely due to like the demand for Dinosaur Jr. at that time. And all of those things have changed. Like Dinosaur Jr. We do well, it's a really consistent, great band, but it
Right.
doesn't provide, it doesn't provide income for me that makes it possible for me to,
Okay.
I'm sad to say it is really it really does all come down to that. Like it's like we need help, we'd actually need, I mean, I think some bands, like the world wants you back. It's the world wants you back. So you get festival offers. I mean, when you're talking about bands like Pavement, Sonic Youth, you're even Archers of Loaf, I mean, even Superchunk. I mean, people really want these bands back and they're willing to provide the resources for that to happen. And with Sebadoh, the world has never really wanted us back. We've always just come back because we wanted to come back.
Mm,
But now it really would depend on some sort of a benefit, like a benefactor that would make that happen. Like, or something nuts like, oh wow, I don't know, some song popped up on TikTok and it went crazy. It's like even like now's the time for bands like Unwound who were not heralded in their time are now the
right.
world wants them back and the kids are flooding to the shows and
Right.
that's making that happen. That's not nothing like that has happened with Sebadoh. There's been no revival. There's not like a unified yes, please Sebadoh come back.
Okay. We'll
And
have
we're
to see
just
about that one.
yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. I mean, I mean, I'm always open to doing stuff, but everything has to be practical.
Right. But you and Dino, you're going on this 24-date mega fucking stadium tour across the US.
Hmm. Yeah. Some of the shows are being canceled now, apparently, though.
Why?
Low ticket sales.
But you sold out like Madison Square Garden,
Yeah,
at
there's a
least.
few. Yeah. Yeah,
Shing.
but we're opening. It's like it's us. We play for a half an hour, then Flaming Lips, and then Weezer.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. Are you doing, because Bake Sale is turning 30 next August 23rd. Are you going to do anything for that?
I think Sub Pop was talking about reissuing it on vinyl.
Right.
So they did a reissue a while back, but it was only on CD.
Okay.
It was a little half-assed. But I think this time actually they would do that. But I think they're going to do it on vinyl.
Okay.
So yeah,
You must be really happy how that second iteration of you, Jay, and Murph playing together has like played
yeah,
out.
I'm really into it. Yeah, it's gotten better and better as it's gone along. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think that we're actually playing better than we've ever played, and we're not
Right.
too old to play as forcefully as we used to. It's like we're still kind of like healthy enough that we can make it happen. And yeah, like just the way that's an instance of where the resources are the resources that we need to keep the band together are available. So we have we have a guitar roadie, and we have a sound engineer, and we have a tour manager, and we have someone who sells t-shirts, and we're all like a little support unit on the road for each other. And it works out really well because we generally only work with people who've been our friends for a long time and people who we trust. And so it's a really nice atmosphere within the band. And when we work, and Jay gets to be Jay, Murph gets to be Murph, I get to be me.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like, we have people taking care of things around us,
Right.
So
not many bands who have come back after like all this time and done so many good. I can think of Swans and like Slowdive did 2 good albums after like 22 years, but like it's
very few.
Yeah.
Very few original lineups. I mean, truly original lineups make it
come
that
back
long.
and do stuff that's actually
Come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a testament to Jay and his consistency, and then also just, like, I don't know. To me, like, the music is the most important thing. Even if the personal stuff is hard or has been hard, or you've been through tough times together, it's like I'm always willing to put it all aside for the music,
Of course.
So.
All right, man. So the Folk Implosion is coming to the UK. That's fucking great news, man. I'm gonna try to come and see you.
Okay.
What else is coming up for you? You're always doing your Raw Impression podcast with Adele.
Just keep the podcast stuff going. That's just something like I don't know what somebody asked me yesterday, like, what's your hobby? And I'm like, does the podcast count? I'm like, maybe that's my hobby, I think it probably is, because we do it for the love of it. It's like I think it's just a way to, it's like I think with everything, like we've talked about, like starting with the early cassettes, it's about telling, it's like a story, it's like you're trying to tell like a personal story and just put some flavoring in there, like put a little flavor. And for me, I like podcasting because I use my 4-track all the time. I use it in every episode, which is great.
Right.
Because I realized, I was like, I can't live the rest of my life without using my 4-track again. I got to get my 4-track back.
Are you always using the Tascam Porta 1 or like?
Yeah, I've tried. I've got another one that I bought recently, but I'm like, it confuses me. I'm like, I can't.
Okay.
The Porta 1 is so simple, and but the one I have is kind of broken, but it doesn't matter. I can do what I need to do on it. Going between Porta 1 plus Pro Tools is like fucking great.
Okay.
It's so cool. It's like back and forth between the two. It's like, this is awesome,
Nice. Dude, thanks for taking the time. I really, really do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
A nice talk.
Yeah, thanks, man. It seems like you really, you get it. You said a lot of really cool stuff to me about it. I really appreciate it.
That's cool, man. And just thank you for your work, everything you've done,
You're welcome.
Keep it up.
Yep.
All right. See you later, dude.
All right, thanks.
All the best, man.
Thanks.